Press it once, it turns red. Then
That one doesn't matter. I'm not going to say anything.
Are we all ready? Okay, I'll welcome everybody to this meeting today. Instead of election of officers, I'm going to refer it to Agnes and she'll make a statement here.
And thank you. And normally at the first committee meeting of the year, we hold elections for chair and vice chair. Some of our regular committee members were unable to attend today, so we will actually defer that election to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, chair's announcements. Good afternoon. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nation communities across our vast regional district. And today we are located in the Cumberland-Shrupnik territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Shrupnik Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Cumberland-Shrupnik and respect the territory and land on which we gather. Thank you. In chairs, I think we'll have an introduction. Now, we can go around the room here, and then we'll probably start with Agnes on the top of the screen there and work our way around the screen. Everybody introduce who they are and who they represent. That didn't go over very well.
Sorry about that. I had to unmute.
Yeah, okay, round.
I'm Agnes Jackson. I'm representing BC Cattlemen's this afternoon. I understand I'm just a temporary rep. They will be, Kamloops Stock will be forwarding a name to you by the end of March. Yes.
Thanks, Agnes. Barb?
Hi, I'm Barbara Roden. I'm the director for the Village of Ashcroft.
And Karen?
Yeah, Karen Raven. I'm the general manager and I'm representing the Grasslands Conservation Council of BC.
Thank you. Morgan?
Hello, my name is Morgan Jumbo. I live in Merritt. I work for Shwakon Tribal Council, Timuc Research, the Lands Department.
Thank you. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Gardner. I'm at Thompson Rivers University, and I'm kind of standing in for Peggy Broad, who's usually at these meetings.
Thanks, Wendy. Jessica Allen?
Hi, I'm Jessica Allen. I'm with Kamloops Forestry Development Corp, and I'm an alternate for Dwayne Parody, who's away today.
And Belatti?
Hi, I'm Vladi Get. I'm with BC Parks here today, acting as an area supervisor for Grassland. Normally Val is the area supervisor, Val Campbell.
Thank you. Now we go.
Hi, Stephanie Russell, BC Parks. I'm the conservation specialist for the Thompson section.
Colleen Hogan, I'm the invasive plant management coordinator for the TNRD and the Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee.
Jamie Vieira, Deputy General Manager of Operations Staff at TNRD.
Jake Devlin, General Manager of Operations, so staff, not a committee member.
Ken Gillis, Chair, Thompson-Nicola Regional District.
Herb Graham, Director for Area N of the Regional District.
Thank you. So that's all our committee members there. So we'll go on to the mover of the November the 17th, 2022 Invasive Plant Management Committee meeting. Recommendation is that the minutes of the Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee meeting dated November the 17th, 2022 be adopted as circulated. Mover in a second. Herb. And yeah, okay, and Stephanie. So all in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. And so we're going to reports and discussions, and we'll turn that over to Colleen or Jamie.
Yeah, I'll take lead here. And I just threw together a couple of slides so people online had something to look at as we move forward here. Oh, I'm not. I forgot I did this to you last time. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to start with the coordinator's report. And I wanted to acknowledge that we have a few new faces joining our committee, and you've met them in the introduction. So the first is Karen Raven. Karen is the Grasslands Conservation Council's general manager and alternate for the GCC on this committee. Mandy's still the lead, but she's off vacationing in Hawaii. So Karen's offered to come and take her place. We also have Vladimira Gat. She is the acting BC Parks alternative. Vladdy's on temporary assignment filling Valerie Campbell's role for the next few months. So I anticipate Valerie will go back to being an alternate once the temporary assignment is complete. So we might see Valerie or Vladdy next meeting, just depending on their work schedules. And then again, we have a familiar face for some of us today. We've been working with BC Cattlemen's Association to get a new representative to sit on our committee. So lucky for us, they've assigned Agnes Jackson to join us temporarily just for today until they're hoping to have someone from Kamloops Stockmen's Association join us for the next meeting. So I just wanted to give you all a big welcome. Okay, so I wanted to let you all know that we hosted our annual land managers meeting on March 3rd, and it was a very successful meeting. We had 28 people attend the meeting representing 17 different organizations. And I just wanted to go over a few of the highlights of the meeting for you in case you weren't in attendance. So first we had research scientists from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada join us and give us presentations on Tree of Heaven and the spotted lanternfly. Ag Canada is trying to raise the profile of Tree of Heaven in BC and across Canada. This tree can impact infrastructure biodiversity, but is also a host to the spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive insect that could potentially have detrimental impacts to our vineyards and orchards. There's no known detections of spotted lanternfly in BC yet. However, there have been reports, an unconfirmed report in Washington State and confirmed reports in Oregon and California. We've since added this tree to our priority invasive plant list as an early detection and rapid response species. And there's real concern that this insect could make its way to BC and make home in areas infested with Tree of Heaven and impact our local vineyards and orchards. So there are large infestations of Tree of Heaven in the Fraser Valley and the Okanagan-Similkameen Valley. And there are only 2 sites right now that are reported in the TNRD. One is in Ashcroft and one is in Kamloops. And I believe Director Roden said that they've been actively managing the one in Ashcroft. So yeah, we've added this to our regional EDR species, and we encourage everybody to look out for this plant this year. And if you do see it, please report it right away. The next presentation from Ag Canada was a presentation on biological control in the Lac du Bois area. And overall, they're showing that the agents are being effective in managing populations over time. There's evidence showing density declining, with historic data showing that spotted knapweed in a square meter was historically 50 bolts per meter squared, and the current data showing this is reduced now down to 10 bolts per meter squared. Further, the seed rain and production at all test sites is below the threshold required for long-term population decline. Ag Canada was also researching whether or not agents were responsible for knapweed population declines, and they found that 90% of the plants that they tested and sampled had biological control attacking them. So it's most likely that it is the agents that are responsible for the knapweed population decline. But they did say there's variability in the data, and you'll see population declines in some areas and maybe not in others, and that could be due to climatic factors such as elevation and it just being too cold for the agents to establish and complete their life cycles. We also had Graham Gielens from the Provincial Interministry Invasive Species Working Group present on the Provincial Soil Subcommittee and some of the work they're doing. So some of the projects that are being initiated include a provincial safe soils certification program and invasive plant compost trials. So the certification program is currently undergoing a feasibility study with the results being expected in the fall. So they should know whether they can move forward or not with that program. And the composting trials are in planning phase, and committee members are working with academic institutions to coordinate research and with regional districts to plan locations for their research plots. And then finally, we spent a lot of time during the meeting getting land manager updates. So we received updates from 5 regional invasive species organizations that all shared a portion of the TNRD's boundaries. These groups provided updates on their priority plants for management, as well as priority plants of concern at our shared borders. And we also received updates from 8 different organizations carrying out invasive plant management in the region. And I'm going to share more on the details of those in agenda item 8B. So we just wanted to give you a bit of an update on funding. So right now, the TNRD is exploring additional funding opportunities with the Canadian Red Cross. And it seems that there might be surplus funding from the 2017 wildfires that may be obtainable to support additional invasive plant management in the Elephant Hill wildfire areas for 2022. So our fund development team is currently in discussion with Red Cross, and at this point, nothing is confirmed, but we're going to continue discussion on that. In regards to the 2021 wildfires, this is something that Canadian Red Cross needs to look into further to see if there's funding available. Again, nothing's confirmed, and we're going to continue conversations with them throughout the spring and summer. We've also submitted applications for the Canada Summer Job, which is a program designed to help young Canadians develop skills and gain paid work experience to successfully transition into the labor market. The funding from this program is going to support the wages for the TNRD/TNI PMC summer student, and will be notified in April if we're successful or not. And then we've also applied for the Eco Canada Science Horizons Youth Internship Grant, and it offers eligible employers salary coverage to create STEM-related job placement opportunities. So we've submitted an application. We're still waiting to hear back. We haven't submitted the application, sorry, it's not open yet. So once it's open, the application will go in, and we're hoping to be successful. And if we are going to extend the 8-month technician position into a full-year position. Oh, need to go back. So, okay, there we go. Our education and outreach contract expired December 31st of last year. So this January, we issued a request for quotation on BC bid and had one proponent submit to the quotation. And I'm happy to say that the TNRD board approved a 5-year contract with Agro West Consulting. So we've had Catherine work with us in past, and I'm happy to continue our relationship with them for the next 5 years moving forward. Some other initiatives we're working on, and I don't really want to steal Karen's thunder on this topic because she'll probably include it in her GCC update. But I did want to inform you that the TNI PMC has been supporting this initiative. So high level, the Friends of Lac du Bois have secured funds to carry out invasive plant management within the Lac du Bois grasslands protected area. I think it's about $25,000. So far, the TNI PMC has assisted with facilitating a workshop and will most likely continue to support with management planning, inventory, and education and outreach where possible. And again, Karen will probably provide more specifics on this initiative when it's her turn to give her update. Moving on to the operational plan for terrestrial invasive plants in the Thompson-Nicola region. This plan was formally approved by the TNI PMC in November. However, we did not make the plan public until this year. We wanted an opportunity for the technical advisory committee to review it and make any final tweaks based on 2021 field data. So there were a few tweaks to the plan in terms of priority species categorization, as well as our containment areas. But it's all done. It's ready for 2022, and we've shared it with our land managers at the land manager meeting, and it's up on the TNRD website. We're also working on getting the shape files for the containment areas into my region view geodatabase so that land managers can access the containment areas to help with their planning. So this is just kind of a fun initiative we've been pulled into. The Ministry of Transportation, TNI PMC, and Lower Nicola Indian Band are working collaboratively on developing a multilingual roadside sign encouraging people to keep their plants contained and from taking flight as they transport them to the eco depots and landfills. So I believe the signs are going to be installed within the Lower Nicola Indian Band Reserve area, and then we're going to have an interpretive sign at the invasive plant disposal bin in the Lower Nicola Eco Depot. And I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to give an update on staffing and the TNRD reorg.
Thanks, Colleen. Yeah, just a quick update for the committee because some titles have changed and there's been a little bit of shifting here. So what's happened to the TNRD as of last fall is we reorganized one of the departments into this new department called operations. And so that moved the invasive plant, moved myself over to a different portfolio, which used to be community services. But invasive plants is still within that portfolio. So essentially Colleen and her program moved with me out of what was environmental services, the solid waste and recycling department, over to what used to be the community services department, but now all under one big umbrella called operations. So long story short, all the TNRD staff involved haven't really changed. We've just changed what umbrella and headings that invasive plant program falls under. So from a structural point of view, the operations department is led by Jake as the general manager, and I'm the deputy general manager, and Colleen is our invasive plant coordinator. Now, we've also just hired back on Emily Anderson, who was a technician working for us in a term position last summer. And so she's coming back beginning on Monday as in an 8-month position of a technician position. We also have a position of a summer student that we posted, and I think are currently in the middle of interviewing for. That'll hopefully start sometime around, well, as soon as school's out, but beginning of May. So the other update is we've now put both the 8-month technician position and the 4-month summer student position are now built into the ongoing budget. So as long as funding sources remain consistent, we're going to keep those positions in place every year. So they're not 12-month positions, but then every spring we'll hire a technician and a summer student as well. So that's the plan going forward. Oh, and there was another thing that was cut off on the screen there. For those who don't know, so Mike Deedles, who had been with us for the last 3-4 years now, he was in a temporary term position delivering the Red Cross invasive plant program. So the funding in that program had ended, and he happily rode off into the sunset for his second retirement. So I've been seeing him up at the ski hill even more often now. So he's his last official day with us was the end of January, but he was only working 1 or 2 days a week through the last few months, kind of wrapped up full time at the end of October.
Okay, and then we were going to give an update as well on the TNRD invasive plant program service expansion. I think Jamie's going to lead that as well.
Yes, back to me on that. So we mentioned this to the committee a number of times over the last year that we were Colleen and I went through a process where we gave, and through the TNRD gave member municipalities an opportunity to opt into the TNRD service that delivered our landowner rebate program, our education program, the sprayer loan out program. More and more, and I think this is a good thing in terms of information, we've been getting more interest from municipalities to participate in our program, but since they didn't pay into it from a taxation point of view, they weren't eligible for those programs. So we gave all the municipalities an opportunity, and 5 of those municipalities have opted in. And so that is effective this year, 2022. And so we're going to be rolling it out. So that means on a real operational level, Clearwater, Sun Peaks, Logan Lake, Merritt, and Clinton, those residents are eligible for landowner rebates. So either the 50% cost share or the 100% rebate under the new Invader program. And they're eligible for the sprayer loan out program as well. And they're contributing into our overall education program that essentially funds into the work of this committee. So we are going to be, this year specifically, we're going to be directing education at those communities so they know they're part of the program, and we're also going to be working at developing contractor capacity in those communities. Press releases and media information will be going out this spring as well to notify them. So
I have a question on this, Jamie. I see on our regional meeting that Barrier was on it. Are they planning on joining up or are they going into it on their own?
Good question. Yeah, so many of the municipalities who declined opting in, they still have an invasive plant role internally. They just decided to not opt in to contribute funding towards our program and have their landowners eligible. So Barrier, I know specifically, they do have a staff person that does invasive plant control work. And they have been participating in our planning processes. But because they've opted out of this, the residents there don't have opportunity to take advantage of the TNRD programs.
Thank you.
I just want to add on to that Chris Matthews with the District of Barrier was on the land managers meeting, and I had some conversation with him, and he said they are hiring a full-time summer student to strictly work on invasive plant removal in Barrier. So
Yeah, I
that's
saw that. I just wondered as a property owner if we qualified for.
No,
not, that's
unfortunately,
all.
no.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so that's the end of that agenda item. So I don't know if you want to, if we could open it up for questions. On the coordinators report.
So I have a question arising from your earlier comments, Colleen. Does anyone remember when, what time of the year, what month, whatever, the Red Cross announced their $1 million contribution? That was for the 2017 fires, wasn't it? How long were they coming to the party on at that time?
You mean when we applied for the funding in 2017 to start that program? Is that what you mean?
When did they announce that we had the funding?
I'm just looking into that. Stand by.
It wasn't really meant to be a tough
Yeah,
question.
well, and it definitely wasn't. I remember we developed the application in 2018, so I don't think it was the operational program was a 3-year program, so it was delivered in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So the announcement, I'm guessing, was sometime early in 2019.
Yeah, we did a press release in November 2018. 2018, yeah.
And that press release was related to the application, I presume? Or was it related to the announcement of the funding?
Funding announcement.
Yeah, our application was at the spring 2018 is when we applied for the funding.
Okay, and we have applied for similar funding to deal with the 2021 fires, correct? Did I understand that correctly, Colleen?
No, there's been no application yet. We've just been having discussions with them of whether or not they're going to have opportunity for this program. They haven't, Red Cross hasn't determined whether they have a process to apply for that yet.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Is there any further questions for Agnes or Colleen on this part of the, those on the line? If not, we can proceed back to Colleen.
All right, so we'll move into the next agenda item, which is the 2021 invasive plant treatment plans and funding allocations. So just a bit of an update that I've been spending the past few months trying to gather information on operational plans from a variety of organizations in our region. And it's tough for this time of year because many are still in the planning phase and their budgets are unconfirmed, but we were able to get some very high level plans for 2022. Updates will be shared from the organizations shown on the screen here today. And as we go through these presentations, feel free to ask questions and also just make note of areas where we could potentially collaborate on some treatments. So there's a few of the groups missing today and I'll give the update on their behalf. So the first set of groups that's missing today are bordering regional invasive species organizations. So again, we had 5, we call them RESOs, share updates at the meeting. And the intent was for them to provide a quick update on their operational plans, in addition to highlighting species of concern at our shared borders. So some of the concerns, I put all their concerns up on the screen there in that chart, but some of the ones that I flagged for our region are the garlic mustard near Armstrong, Cypress spurge in Edge Hills, tansy, ragwort, and Scotch broom in the Fraser Valley, and the perennial pepperweed south of 100 Mile House. And those are fairly close to our borders. And I'm thinking maybe this year those might be some potential areas for some enhanced inventory and surveys. So I just wanted to leave this up here for a minute and reach out to the rest of you to see if there's any additional plants on here that you guys are flagging as concern and that we should be raising our awareness around. And it'd be the plants under the concerns at our borders. Okay, hearing nothing, I'll take what I've flagged and I'll move forward with those. But if in the future you guys are concerned about any of those, just pop me an email and we can work together to make a plan on how to manage those.
Gordon has
Sure.
a question up there. I can't see the screen, so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Barb.
Perfect. Just the tree of heaven, it's a perennial one. I had heard some anecdotal reports that it was spreading south from Ashcroft, I guess along the Highway 1 corridor to around Spence's Bridge. So I guess that might just be a concern possibly with the Fraser Valley Regional District.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. That's probably an area we should get out in inventory as well. Okay. Anybody else before we move forward? Okay. So the first group to share information with us was BC Hydro. They cover a large part of the province. And they do have contribution agreements with many regional organizations. However, there is no agreement with the TNRD at this point in time. I have talked with Jake Bapty about getting an agreement with them just to help coordinate some treatments in the region, but we're in the discussion phase, so nothing confirmed at this point. BC Hydro mainly coordinates their work with Purity Feed and treats BC Hydro right-of-ways that are run through private land being treated under the Purity Feed aerial treatment program. So that's kind of how they're coordinating their treatments. And I know they also treat based on complaint. So if there's private landowners out there that want treatment on hydro lines going through their property, they need to give BC Hydro a phone call. And I did mention there is a large blue weed site on a hydro line north of Cache Creek on multiple jurisdictions, including hydro. So Jake and I are going to be coordinating some treatments in that area this summer. The next group was BC Parks, and we do have Stephanie Russell here today. So I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to give an update on parks. And you can just ask me to advance slide. Sure. Go to the next one.
Okay, so I just included this map here. BC Parks Thompson section organizes our area into 5 management areas that you can see with the colored background there. And the red, it's a little light on here, but that's the IPMCs for TNIPMC, shows just the overlap. So it can be a little bit complicated, and we also have one area that is within Columbia Shuswap and one that is within the Lillooet Regional Invasive Species Society. So we're attempting to coordinate within the 3 committees, and our priorities are set by management area. Last year, our funding was 11,000 for the entire Thompson. We don't know what it will be this year, and it's typically allocated in June, so it's also a little late to be coordinating with the committee. We found that last year that by the time we got the funding, it was difficult to coordinate to just give the money to the committee. So this year we've determined our priorities by management area and have set 3 priority parks within those management areas. That was determined by looking at the priority weed species as well as known or anticipated activities within the park. So for grasslands, which includes Lac du Bois, Paul Lake, etc., those are our priorities. Paul Lake number 1, number 2, Lac Bois, and number 3, Monty Creek. Northern Forest, up by Clearwater North, Wells Gray, Finn Creek, and North Thompson. Finn Creek and North Thompson both have Trans Mountain pipeline crossing through, so that's why those made the list. Southern Rivers around Merritt. Our priorities are Kentucky, Elaine, Monk Park, and the fire impacted parks that include Tonquah, Kehis, and a couple of different ecological reserves. Finally, Western Mountains. That one includes Juniper Beach, Edge Hills, and again, fire impacted parks like Bonaparte and Mount Savanaugh. Eastern Lakes is within the Columbia-Shuswap. So our priority projects for 2022, one, we always do annual ranger training, so we'll be doing that again this year. It was also a challenge we had last year was having rangers with the herbicide applicator certificate, but without the confidence to use that certificate. So we're looking at doing some mentoring with either the TNRD contractor or with our own contractor this year. We're also going to continue installation of some signage. We have several parks where we have boot brush stations installed, and we have plans to put more of those out. And we also had this new knapweed biocontrol sign created that will be installed this summer. That sign will be going into Lac du Bois and Kentucky Elaine parks. And we're also working on a few partnership projects. So the TNRD Earth Ranger PEP application, we were definitely putting our support towards that and helping out any way we can. Columbia-Shuswap also has PEP projects. And then the Friends of Lac du Bois invasive plant project that I think Karen will be speaking to. I'll just skip over that one. And that's it. I like to include this slide. This is the Trophy Meadows in Wells Gray, and it's nice to just remember why we're doing all this invasive plant work to try to protect ecosystems like this one.
Thank you. I have one more question. These boot brush stations, is that where you like a check for on boats while you do your boots to make sure you haven't got?
We've been putting them in at trailheads and as a sign that has some educational information about priority species that are in that area. And then at the bottom, it actually has just a brush on three sides that you can slide your boot through to try to knock off any seeds, mud, etc. as you go in and out of the trail.
That's a really good idea. Mm-hmm. Any further questions for Stephanie? Oh, Barbara, Odin?
Yeah, it's Morgan Jumbo here, Shwakam Tribal. I have a question.
Go ahead, Morgan.
I was wondering if anybody contacted you about the Tonquah Lake area and the range fence repairs. Do we need to coordinate with them at all? You know, for the type of work that we do with them too?
Yeah, we work with Glenroe on that. So the fence repair contract is going through FLNRO RD, or I guess they're now MOF. I'm not entirely sure, but so they do the contract and they just advise us. They let us know when it's happening. But other than that, we haven't had a lot of involvement.
Thank you, Jim. If no further one, I'll turn it back to Colleen.
Okay, so the next to give an update, I'm going to invite Karen Raven to give an update on behalf of Grasslands Conservation Council. So you can just ask me to advance slide, or there is only one slide for you, sorry, Karen. So this is it. Go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, we're just working on our annual budget, and certainly projects related to invasive species as one of the major threats to grasslands is a big part of that. We're also working on our 5-year strategic action plan, and that's something we've had some initial feedback from members, and we'll be also sending that out as well. Where do we go over the next 5 years, and what are the outcomes we'd like to achieve? And of course, keeping our collaborative approach. So the projects in Lac du Bois, we've worked with Environment and Climate Change Canada, and they provided funding to GCC. They asked us to put forward some projects. So of course, we highlighted the projects that we work collaboratively, and the Lac du Bois area was one that was selected. So we received $5,000 for this fiscal year to the end of March, with which, and thanks to Colleen, who's a co-facilitator with me, we put on a session with the Friends of Lac du Bois, looking at priority areas, priority invasive plant species, as well as the overall approach. So that sets the stage for the next pot of money that's coming in, and that is $25,000, and that includes funding for actual on-the-ground projects, contractors, and other workshop on the work planning, as well as working with Indigenous knowledge keepers and really keeping that whole collaborative approach. So that is for boots on the ground projects as well, coming up this summer. And thanks to Parks and everyone, actually, it's part of the whole project for the in-kind support, because while we did receive that funding, we have equal amount in in-kind support from all the member organizations. So we're really excited for the upcoming April workshop, where we're just going to detail exactly what the work plan is going to look like for implementation. So that will be on the protected area portion of the Lac du Bois. We also have a Habitat Conservation Trust Fund application, and they provide seed money for submitting larger 5-year applications. And we're also, if successful, we'll look at working with the Friends of Lac du Bois as a way to ensure we have 5 years worth of funding to address invasive species and other restoration projects related to species at risk in grassland habitat. Relating to another project that we work on is the Laurie Geisham Memorial Grassland Interpretive Site up at the Lundbum and out of Merritt. And that is again to support invasive species work, specifically on spotted knapweed, although there is others. So we like to have a demonstration site and a variety of treatments that we can look at. The site itself is a huge center where people come and do work with school children, with college classes, forestry week. We had the BC Institute of Agrologists, but the fire came. So that's planned again for this year. So I'm also approaching NVIT as well. So just ensuring that it's a real hub and where we can share information across that. So that will go in to the McLean Foundation, as well with our overall budget planning. And just to give everyone a heads up, we're going to be having a June outdoor event, and that will include as well, we've highlighted funding for these areas such as the Laurie Geisham site and others for our funders. And again, reaching out with intention to the Invasive Species Council of BC. As a provincial organization, the GCC would like to engage. There's a lot of, as you know, we're speaking to the choir, opportunities, shall we say, to work on invasive species and the threats to grasslands. And continuing on, we have funding again from the British Columbia Community Gaming Grant, and that will be for continuing with an outreach coordinator. That'll be one of the projects they are involved on. And we're finding with the work that Christy did for the GCC last year, there's a lot of opportunities for increasing awareness. We're just seeing some of the comments that came in from people who they're surprised and intrigued about the fact that there's grasslands out there, but there's a lot of educational opportunities. And I think that also relates to creating people's awareness of the invasive species that are one of those threats and how they can potentially play a role in changing that. And I guess thanks for putting up our webinar series that's coming up. We're highlighting grasslands, and not just from we gave an opportunity other areas outside of the Thompson-Nicola and the Okanagan. So we'll be looking at the very northern grasslands, the Peace Country, out at the Oak Meadows down on the coast and the island. And so that's going to be a really interesting, I'm really pleased with the turnout that we have already. So that's just 3 out of the 4, as well our newest director, Michael Kiefer from the Kootenay region. He'll be presenting on a couple of his favorite grasslands from the Kootenay area. So that's just kind of a little bit of what GCC is up to. I tried to just put it sort of in the focus of from an invasive species perspective, but yes, welcome any comments or questions.
Any questions for Karen?
I have a comment, Karen, it's Colleen here. Just with your outreach coordinator, it'd be great to link with them and maybe do some shared events and share resources so we can help each other pass that information along.
That would be fantastic.
Great.
Yes, that would be ideal.
Thank you very much, Karen. I don't see any more questions. I'll turn
Well,
it
thank
back to
you.
Colleen.
So the next group to give an update on is the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. And unfortunately, they weren't able to attend the land managers meeting and they are not able to attend the meeting today. But Crystal Chadburn, who is the Senior Invasive Plant Specialist, did send me some information to share on their behalf. So I'm just going to read it to you. Budgets for 2022-23 fiscal year and any potential funding for 2021-2022 year end are not known at this time. Invasive plant management plans are dependent on what budgets are received and when they are known. Their intent is to continue to prioritize provincial EDRR species, regional EDRR species, provincial top 25, which are on the screen, followed by high priority species for the region in that order as their budget allows. The invasive plant program hopes to continue building on and expanding on Indigenous partnerships for invasive plant control on provincial public lands where possible. And the invasive plant program will also continue their biocontrol program, including monitoring of biocontrol efficacy on spotted knapweed within the TNRD in partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Invasive BC is the new BC invasive species database, and it's really close to being launched, and it's going to replace IAP when it goes live, which is the invasive alien plant program, the provincial database that exists right now. Virtual training is going to be required prior to gaining access to the new system, and it's that access to the training is going to be circulated in the upcoming weeks. The invasive plant program and much of the provincial government's natural resource sector is currently undergoing a reorganization with a new Ministry of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship being created and the current Ministry of Flynn Road shifting to Ministry of Forests. And I believe their invasive plant program will shift under the Ministry of Forests. Details of how the reorg may impact invasive plant management across BC and within the TNRD remains to be seen, and more information will be shared as it's known. And then finally, Cheryl, who is our committee rep for Flynn Road. So Cheryl's on leave until further notice, and her return date's not known at this time. So if there's any correspondence to the ministry, please direct that to Crystal Chadburn until further notice. They do say with Cheryl off and their border zone specialist position still vacant, the invasive plant program is limited in staff capacity at this time, and they appreciate our patience and understanding as they do their best to respond to our requests and participate in meetings. So that's the update on behalf of the ministry.
Thank you. I'm surprised that Horolicium is way down at number 19. If you look at the North Thompson, it's about number 2, I think. Thank you.
Are you referring to the graphic? Yeah, that's a provincial scope, not regional scope.
Yes.
And yeah, that's not our list. That's the provincial list.
No, on the previous one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It showed number 19, Horolicium.
Oh, I see. Is there
And it's actually quite high up in the North Thompson, and I think purpleweed down in the Merritt area and that. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, it was just a note.
do you know, Stephanie, if those are prioritized or are they just listed as the top 25 equally? You don't know. Okay. Are we able to see if Graham's on the call? I'm not sure if he is. I'm thinking not. No, okay. So I'll give the update on behalf of Ministry of Transportation. They do have an unconfirmed budget of $150,000 for invasive plant treatments in the TNRD. And they're planning on $5,000 to support the TNI PMC's functions as well. Graham did mention that they're putting in additional requests for flood impacted areas for the next several years. So that that request is in, but they haven't heard back yet. And then they're just continuing their partnerships with the TNRD in terms of roadside treatments and the Invasive Species Council of BC, who's going to administer their gravel pit treatments. This year, in terms of roadside treatments, we're going to spend less time on those large linear treatments because we tend to get more bang for our buck under the Good Neighbor program, where we're treating adjacent to private lands that are treating on their property. And we're also going to focus some effort and resources on high priority provincial and regional invasive plants. And then we're going to expand inventories as well. So the first one, more inventories in flood and fire impacted areas, and that's kind of budget depending based on that request Graham's putting in, and we might be able to do a little bit under the TNIPMC. And then we also need to get out and check our regional containment areas just to ground truth them and make sure they're accurate. So that was the update from transportation.
I have a comment on that.
roadside treatment. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I just have a comment on the roadside treatments, just to emphasize the first point Colleen made about the shift to having more emphasis on the Good Neighbor program and less on linear treatments. So I think this is something that we need to, everyone on the committee to sort of to take note of and communicate out to landowners that we're interacting with. So this is I guess a good news piece for those landowners who are actively treating weeds on their own property. So what this means is that we're focusing more energy. So the MOTI dollars managed by Colleen through the TNRD, most of those dollars are going to focus more on work in front of those people's property who are doing their own work, and less on doing point A to B on a roadside where the landowners may or may not be doing it. So we're trying to get better bang for our buck with where other land managers are treating, then MOTI funds are going to be focused on that. And I guess this is in a way also acknowledging that we're never going to be able to, at current funding levels, there's no chance of treating all the roads from point A to B. So instead we're focusing on where other land managers are treating it, and then we'll make progress that way.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, I'm gonna invite Jessica Allen to give an update on behalf of Tk'emlúps Chebechem.
Welcome, Whitehop. Here for Dwayne Purdy. So then what we're looking at right now is an anticipated budget of about $100,000. So far, our anticipated plan is to have a field crew for the summer inventorying and spraying previously treated sites that were outside of the heli spray program that we did last year at Strawberry Hill, as well as having treating the Lewis Lake corridor and the Trap Lake Reserve, which is out towards Highway 5A. Yeah, any support from MOTI on road right-of-way spraying in conjunction with these activities would be greatly appreciated, similar to what we had in the partnership last year with spraying around Paul Lake Road. And that's about all I received from Dwayne for the update. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there any questions for Jessica on her report?
Jessica, it's Colleen here. I was just curious, when you and Dwayne have specifics on the areas that you're treating ready, I don't know if you'll have them available on our map or if you can share them on a map with me. That would be really helpful for us to plan some additional roadside treatments through the reserve.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make a note of that and make sure that we're sharing information with regards to our inventories.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.
Thanks, Jessica. Go ahead, Colleen.
All right, so I'll give a quick update on the TNRD. So this year, our program budget's anticipated to be about $675,000. And those dollars are going to be used to support the private lands program, management on TNRD owned and controlled land. This amount does include the MOTI roadside treatments, as well as the Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee function. So just a quick overview of the TNRD invasive plant program services. This year, the budget's up about $50,000, I believe, due to the service expansion. So we have a $265,000 operating budget. And those are going to be used, that money is going to be used to cover the new invader 50% cost share, sprayer loan out, and biocontrol programs. And as mentioned before, we've extended those services to Clinton, Clearwater, Sun Peaks, Merritt, and Logan Lake. So we're excited to get that rolling. And that's just a sneak peek there of the updated brochure that's going to be coming out pretty quick. In terms of TNRD owned and controlled land, we just met with the solid waste management facility or the solid waste management department on Monday this week. So locations that are for high priority for treatment are indicated on the screen. Additional locations may be added to this list depending on available resources once all these high priority sites are treated. Generally, treatment efforts are going to focus on regional high priority species, in addition to nuisance weeds that are particularly along the electric fences at several of these sites. They do pose a fire hazard. And then I just wanted to touch base on our invasive plant disposal bin pilot at Lower Nicola Eco Depot. So we looked at the scale data and it's shown the amount of invasive plants being disposed at the site has increased almost by 50%. And we did look into other scale data to see if that percentage was coming out of another waste stream like household garbage, and it was not. So this is kind of indicative that this bin is a good education piece. It's removing barriers and people are using it. So with the success of the pilot, we've been talking about putting a bin at Heffley Eco Depot in South Thompson. And it seems Heffley is more ideal for 2022 because of the landfill being right there and it's easy to dispose of the bin. However, there's more logistics to consider when we look at South Thompson regarding transferring material to the landfill. So that might not happen this year, but we'll keep pushing for it for 2023 if it doesn't happen. So again, the TNRD is going to continue coordination administration of MOTI roadside treatments throughout the region. Again, less emphasis on linear treatments. This type of treatment may still happen, but is limited, and it's done to protect local area values such as extensive agricultural areas and to create a buffer for invasive plants spreading from adjacent regions. So we have Westwold, that's right next to the regional district of North Okanagan, and they have a plethora of weed issues and things creeping up the highway from the North Okanagan. So Westwold's a good area to target, and it's also a high agricultural area. The Coldwater Road is on our radar because of the flooding. Aberdeen Road, there's concerns from First Nations with blue weed out there, in addition to Woodward Road, which leads up to the Lower Nicola Eco Depot. The VLA Road, there's horiolism creeping in that area, and it's a high horse area. Lots of small ranchettes out there. And then again, Kamloops, the Shuswap Road, we have hoary crests moving down that corridor. So those are just some of the larger scale treatments that might take place this year. Additional treatments are going to be carried out to support regional and provincial strategic management. So I've listed on there, those are our priority species that we're going to focus on this year. So we're going to treat all of the hoary crest, knotweed, wild chervil, wild parsnip, poison hemlock treatments on all known sites. We're going to treat all of the blue weed outside of containment areas and may consider select locations within the containment area to help protect sensitive land values. Common tansy, again, we're going to try and treat all of the plants outside of the containment area and prioritizing treatments on the eastern boundary with the CSRD and RDNO. So really heavy focus on Highway 1 out towards Chase in that area. Horiolism, we're going to manage invasive plants outside of regional containment and prioritize infestations adjacent to pastures and agricultural lands. And then if the budget permits, we'll start tackling some of the regional category C species like leafy spurge and baby's breath. Again, we're going to continue with the Good Neighbor program. Typically every year I take the Purity aerial treatment shape file, and I determine where these segments of roads are against people's properties. So these are some of the roads that have come up for treatment this year. And again, they're just going to be small segments that'll be treated. And then again, we get phone calls throughout the year from land owners that would like treatment adjacent to their property because they're treating on their property. And we typically get 50 to 60 requests a year to go out and do those treatments. And then again, I've just put it on there that now that we know some of the priorities for Tk'emlúps and BC Parks, we'll probably try and tag some roadside treatments in those areas as well. And we'll work with you guys to figure out exactly where those are in the next few weeks. Again, enhanced inventory. So we're going to focus on regional containment boundaries. We've had a request from the Okanagan Smilkameen Invasive Species Society to help with inventories near the Colmont Road. So it's a road that crosses our border, and there's a heavy infestation of scentless chamomile out there. It's not a huge priority for us, but it is for the Okanagan Smilkameen. So we're going to work in collaboration to see if we can come up with a management plan for the scentless chamomile in that area. And then again, we'll probably support with the GCC and Friends of Lac du Bois project and do some surveys in Lac du Bois, support with flood impacted areas where significant amount of road construction has occurred. So one of the biggest concerns is there was such haste to replace all this infrastructure last year that the transportation was getting their, it's suspected they were getting their material from contaminated gravel pits, particularly out of the Merritt area, which has blue weed. So Graham's quite concerned that we could see blue weed starting to pop up on Highway 8 and 1 from that material. And then again, to try and get some inventories done in these fire impacted areas from where the fires were last year.
Is that on your Trans Mountain one? On your regional meeting, you asked about the maintenance, ongoing maintenance of the pipeline after the pipeline is in. And there seemed to be some delay on how long that they were going to be doing. Like, I know Agnes has said a lot of times it should be 20 years. And on there, they're reluctant to even commit up to 5 years. So is there a timeline that for people to maintain these right of ways through our, is it perpetual or? Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, the information we got at the meeting in terms of Trans Mountain, and I'll provide their update in the next next couple slides, but we asked if there was long-term monitoring plan once the pipeline was in, and their response was very vague. And they just said they'll monitor and treat until the objectives within their veg management plan were achieved. So there was no set timeline. It was just, it just seemed to be ongoing until maybe the landscape got to a certain point and then they would stop.
And I'm wondering if as a committee, and it doesn't have to be at this meeting, but maybe Colleen should look at that and come back with a recommendation of a length of time that these right-of-ways have to be maintained, because they're there forever. And so I think they should be maintained through as long as they have the right-of-way.
Okay, I'll make a note to action that. And then I was talking with Stephanie before the meeting, and they seem to have a set timeline for BC Parks monitoring. So I don't know, Stephanie, if you're able to speak to that.
Sure. I guess just in particular in Lac du Bois, we push to have a longer monitoring period. So they're monitoring for reclamation in Lac du Bois is 10 years. In most other areas, that's 5. But they are required to have ongoing treatments even beyond that point. So they still, on their original line 1, they still do invasive plant treatments on that right away, even now. So the expectation will be the same with the new one. Having said that, there's definitely some issues with invasive species on their right of ways. It's a really long linear corridor, so I mean, it's impossible to treat it all. So I think our expectation is that there's still going to be an issue.
And I think it will be, but I think we should start off even equal to what your expectations are on lactic loss are. Would be a good start. So bearing what we've got.
I think maybe what I can do is dig a little deeper into their veg management plan. And now that I have context there, I can actually ask them, I'll dig a little deeper and I'll give you an update, and then we can decide if we want to make a formal recommendation or not.
Yeah, I think we should have a specified time. Yeah, thank you.
I got a question on that, Stephanie. So is that in their veg management plan that they've committed to that longer term monitoring?
Yeah, they have a separate veg management plan for lactic loss that commits to that. Beyond their regular, they have a number of plans where it talks about monitoring, but there's a grassland plan, there's a veg management plan. They have a few different ones, but specific to lactic loss, they have just its own plan for the park.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, so this will be the update on Trans Mountain. So they're I forget the title of the gentleman. I think it was like a general manager came on and gave us an update stating that 50 to 60% of the pipeline was impacted by the 2021 floods, and they're just in the process of fixing damage and remediating the sites. And that's all they could do. That's all they offered in terms of an update in regards to damage of the pipeline. So Trans Mountain has just updated their integrated veg management plan. So maybe we're a bit late on making the ask, but we can still push forward with it. But we were informed that their species list reflects regional legislation and provincial legislation, which I'm assuming is the current Weed Control Act. And it was raised that these lists are very old and dated and don't accurately reflect what's happening on the ground today. So I recommended that they have a look at our regional priority list, and they kind of bounced it back saying, we'll look at their list and source out any plants that might be missed. So that's something we can do. Just have another look at their list and make sure they're not missing anything for consideration. So their primary areas for treatment around their facilities, main valves, and the pipeline right of way. And they're going to be monitoring and carrying out treatments along the extent of the pipeline that runs through the TNRD, so from Alberta down to Hope. And then again, we asked about the long-term management plans, and the answer was quite vague, that they'll treat until the requirements outlined in the veg management plan were achieved.
I was just going to comment too. We were just notified that they don't anticipate completion of the project now until fall of 2023. So it's an extension of that construction period, and as it applies to parks, that just means that we're sitting there with that right away cleared and soil sitting there for an additional year. So something to consider on other areas as well.
Did they mention why there was the delay in completion?
There's a number of things. I think the last year they faced some pretty significant challenges with they had a safety shutdown, and then they had to shut down for heat, and then smoke, and then floods, and then etc.
Morgan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add and let Colleen know and the committee know that Chwakam Tribal Council is involved with Trans Mountain work through the Indigenous Advisory Monitoring Committee. And through that monitoring committee, we can, formally make recommendations. So I think our post-construction monitoring probably will continue for the lifetime of the pipeline. So if there's an avenue there, we can go through the IAMC.
Thanks, Morgan.
That's great, Morgan. I'll probably touch base with you to just, for me to get a better idea of your involvement with the pipeline and see where and if we need to kind of navigate through that avenue.
No further questions? Go ahead.
Okay, and then last but not least, we had a verbal update from the Invasive Species Council of BC. Just again reiterating, they're going to be carrying out MOTI's gravel pit treatments, and they're prioritizing the gravel pits based on active versus not active pits. So they're going to treat the active pits first. And they're also planning on continuing the Stronger BC Action Team program despite funding not being secured yet. They're planning on having a team located in Kamloops, and right now there's tons of employment opportunities across the province available through their organization. So if you know anybody that's looking, just send them to the ISCBC website and chances are they may get a job. And that was it for the updates. And I'm just gonna pass it over to Jamie to kind of lead this piece of the meeting.
Yeah, I guess before I jump in, maybe we should open it up if there's anyone else on the call or committee that wants to provide any updates. I know, I think we still have Wendy from TRU on there. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Wendy, but is there any research happening from your end that you want to notify the committee on? Okay, I'll carry on. You could jump in if something comes to mind. But I guess to kind of close the loop on the whole intent of this part of the discussion, and also to remind the committee of the timing of this meeting. The intent of this March meeting is for everyone around the table here, or virtual table, I guess. We're all involved in invasive plant control and land management for our own organizations, and then collectively as the committee, we're doing coordination, education, outreach. So from the operational perspective, we're sharing our experience. But so we just want to highlight again that the purpose of this March meeting, in addition to just hearing what other people are doing, is looking for opportunities to collaborate. And actually, I was encouraged sitting here, hearing a few of those. We got the update from Kamloops about the work they're doing, and it sounds like we can coordinate that with the MOTI Good Neighbor program and treat on those highways. So we just really, as this part of the meeting, wanted to open it up if there was any sort of discussion or ideas from each organization of how and where we might be able to collaborate further on our on the ground treatments this year. I'm just going to open that up.
Sorry, Jamie, it's Wendy. I couldn't get my mute to come off last time, and it was like trying to talk, but I couldn't get on. I just wanted to jump in and say, yeah, we have a bunch of grad students doing some work. Obviously, there's often a lot of the research related invasive species tied in. And we have been in discussions with Graham about potentially, if that composting project goes forward, being involved in working with that as well. So that's kind of where we're sitting.
Thanks for that, Wendy.
Any question for Wendy? Anybody?
I do have a question, Wendy, and I'm not sure if you know about this project, but there was Locke Fraser sent an update last fall saying there was a study being done on the economic impacts of invasive plants in the TNRD or in the province. Do you know anything about that?
Yes. So currently, because I just saw the grad students presentation the other day, we actually have the master's showcase going on. So last Thursday, all the first years talked about their topics. And one of the first years is doing that in conjunction with the economics professor, Peter Segaris here. So she's just started on that project. So we'll probably have more information in the next year or so. So she just started, I believe, this fall.
Do you know any of the specifics of the research? Are they looking at impacts of a specific species or onto a specific sector? Is it?
I would have to find out more detail. I believe that she was using, I think it was knapweed, and I'll have to go back and look because there were 16 different talks, so I don't want to confuse stuff. But I think she was using that as the example to generate. And there's also another student that's looking at using different imagery To study invasive species. Again, she's just using one species as a representation. And I think some of that research might be applicable to this organization, but I can find out more about what, I'd have to go back and look what those students are there. They haven't put forward their specific research proposals yet. They're kind of in that stage where they're developing them. I think probably by April, all of those plans will be in place, but I can find out specifically on the one that's doing the economic analysis and get a little bit more information. If you email me and remind me, then I can send you that information and also her supervisor contacts. I think Locke is a co-supervisor along with Peter Segaris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want anybody that comes up with some ideas on your last question? What can the Thompson-Nicola invasive plant management do to improve operations? So if people come up with an idea at home, they can contact Colleen or Jamie and with these ideas, is that be an idea?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And they could even, they can email us. But I was going to go through those questions to see if anyone had ideas right off the top that they wanted to go through.
So Jamie, just before you start, Morgan might have a question.
Oh, I just wanted to, share an update from us too as well at Twelcome Tribal Council. We are getting incoming referrals and quite a significant block lists from various licensees and our technicians who do the preliminary field reconnaissance surveys do look out for invasive plants. And we put in our recommendations to manage for those invasive plants if we do ever come across them. That's more geared towards forestry operations, but I was hoping to maybe have more of an impact through this committee on areas on local band reserves within the Nicola, or at least our member bands within our tribal council anyway. So I was just trying to see if there, I'm glad. Question number one, is there opportunity to collaborate? So yeah, I'm quite concerned with blue weed on my home community of Nuwaj anyway. So I'm just wondering if there's other opportunities, we can combat those on other reservations in the Nicola here.
Thank you. Jamie, do you want to reply?
So thanks for that, Morgan. So are you guys intending on doing some operational work on blue weed in Nuwaj? And I'm just wondering then, Colleen, is that something that we can use our good neighbor funding through MOTI to support?
Yeah, we can, if we have to have permission to treat through the reserve. So as long as that's not an obstacle, then yes, we can tag in some good neighbor treatments if work's being done in the reserve. But I guess my question to you, Morgan, is what would be your specific needs? Is it more like having the TNI PMC come in and train people to do inventories or to set up a management plan for the reserve, or just treatments? I'm just curious to get a sense of what your requirements are.
Yeah, even training some of our technicians that we do have now to do complete inventories. We do have, some knowledge of our traditional plants here, but yeah, it would be nice to complete inventories. On that last land managers meeting, I kind of poked around with Modi on conducting inventories and floods and fire impacted areas, because most of our technicians do have a natural resource background. So just trying to help out in any way I can too with invasive plants. But there is no active program for blue weed. I'm just trying to see if there's one way we could, communicate that to all the bands and see if there's we could help get rid of it.
Have you, I'm just curious if you've been in touch with the Lower Nicola Indian Band, because they're trying to pull together a weed management plan for their reserve. So it might be something you could tag into. particularly on blueweed?
Yeah, no, I haven't personally, but I think JJ is one person I have been contacting in the past. But he can't remember which company he's with, but he does a lot of invasive plant works.
Yeah, so I think Sage Fisher is the one that's kind of trying to pull the plan together. So maybe what I can do is talk with Sage to see if there's a way for you guys to tag in on the work she's doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Morgan.
Awesome. Well, there's some good discussion and collaboration right there. So on that same note, I guess I'll move on to the second question that we have on the screen here. And I know this is going to sound like a loaded question, but we wanted to bring it up for discussion. Is there any specific regional management and invasive plant management needs that need to be addressed that people want to highlight here at the meeting, and that may or may not already be, on any one of these agencies who spoke's radar yet at this meeting, who spoke on this meeting?
So Jamie, if I could, we have been getting a lot of pressure from First Nations about blueweed in Lower Nicola. So maybe collectively there's something the TNI PMC could do to help guide management in that area.
Karen, did you have something?
Yes, I think one is from a GCC perspective for question 1, and the other is relating to number 2, just where I live in the regional district. I don't think there's a lot of new folks moving in, and they're not really, it's just a small community, but they don't really understand the impact of invasive species. So just having materials that are available to support that knowledge, I think would be really helpful. And I'm sure I can work with Colleen on that. I found it very curious because there's certainly a lot of information out there, but targeting some of these expanding smaller rural communities. And the other relates for the opportunities to collaborate. And I think, Colleen, you mentioned with our outreach coordinator, but I was thinking as well, if we've got quite a reach with our e-newsletter, and we're having some on-site events with the Institute of Agrologists and with other educational. So if we had materials or some of those pull-up banners, or even, one of the summer students along, we could really integrate, because we're kind of all over. Our e-news series, if you want it to highlight priority regional plants, and certainly it's not just going to be exclusive to this region. We're also going to be having an online restoration workshop in June. And a lot of the things that we've heard, where do people start? What about seed mixes? I mean, we've got to have that discussion about invasive species. So I think that would be another opportunity to bring in this organization as well. And our Grasslands Conservation Council magazine will be going out, and we're looking our resilient and healthy grasslands and the role with affecting climate. So withstanding the changing climate and all sort of the disasters. So I think there's a real, maybe we can tie in on each of those pieces with something from this organization and highlighting species, and just sort of really make sure all of that's integrated. And I know we could meet and just maybe put a bit of a game plan, how we can leverage sort of our online community and our membership and some of our events. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I like the idea of us kind of meeting and hashing out where we can align our efforts. I did want to go back to your comment about the community material. I'm just curious about which community you're in, and is there like a species that you're most concerned about? Because in past, we've been able to do mail outs to communities highlighting a specific invasive plant or several invasive plants, and that seems to kind of be the best way to get to people aside from going door to door and talking to them.
Yeah, for where I live on the south side of Nisconlith Lake, and there's been a little community there for like decades, but it's really starting to expand a little bit more. And a lot of the folks don't live here full time, or they're moving from other areas like Vernon or Vancouver. So I think that would be great for a targeted mailing. We've kind of got everything here. We've got a lovely display of course, your traditional knapweed and sulfur cinquefoil, but there's a lot of Horiolisum, and certainly I've been picking at, and some other neighbors have, but then with some of the new construction, you know, they're putting a huge bank of dirt, and there's no, certainly we do neighbor conversations, but just, I think making people aware of what are some of the things you can do, or even that it's going to be an issue. I mean, that could be 100% invasive species patch. So I think that mail out idea, I think would be nice.
Okay.
But some of them they don't actually get their mail here. But if I think you have access to.
Yeah, we have ways to figure out where they are. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks, Karen. Any further questions?
Yep.
Oh, back to you, Colleen.
So Colleen,
Or Jamie.
yeah, so picking up on the blue weed in Lower Nicola, are we wanting to kind of related to question 2, the kind of the sub questions there, are resources required to tackle that, and how the TNRD, TNI PMC can help that? I think that was the question that you brought up. So and I guess this question is back to you, Morgan, as well, is what role can we play kind of as a collective here, and the resources we have for education coordination to help support the, I guess, a strategy for blue weed in that Lower Nicola area? Is there any thoughts out there of what's needed?
Yeah, any kind of suggestions, you know, would be helpful. You know, the community outreach would be a good start. And then just awareness, I guess, too. And maybe, I don't know what we can do. Like you said, we might be able to use a good neighbor program and, you know, actually treat these with sprayers, or even using the loan outs, and, you know, training some band members to spray all the weeds.
So you mentioned education, Morgan. You know, what about the idea of doing a workshop, like with, you know, the public works staff at the bands, like to educate those operational staff on blue weed? Do you think that would be a good angle?
Yeah, I think, well, for Noach and Shaq, and I can say that for sure, but I'm not sure about all the other bands, but I think that would work for them.
I'm also wondering, Jamie, if it's like one step higher, and it's kind of like forming a working group of all the key players in that area and asking these questions to them, saying like, what are your needs and how can we help you? And then kind of working through it from there, so that there's a coordinated approach all throughout Lower Nicola. It's just not reserve specific or community specific.
And we have correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, we have a containment line already that's part of the operational plan to try keep blue weed from expanding further.
Lower Nicola is in the middle of the containment area. So it'd be one of those exceptions where we're trying to protect local area values.
Okay, so that's something we could start working on. Do we have any other thoughts out there on opportunities to collaborate and or sort of regional management needs that need to be addressed?
No, no. Doesn't look like it.
I guess we always come up with this barrier every year, but trying to get the railways on board. And I'm wondering if there's something we can do, because the wild parsnip, which is a provincial, they're trying to control it provincially, so they're treating every site. It's now creeping on to the railway and spreading towards Chase. So just wondering, like, I've tried to reach out to them, but from what I've heard from other people is that they won't do anything unless there's a push at the federal level. But I don't know if it's worth having the TNRD maybe send them a letter or reach out to them.
So I could give a little background on that. Through this committee about probably going back about 5 or 6 years ago now, through this committee up to the TNRD board, there was letters sent to both CN and CP requesting specific action on invasive plants. And I think their specific request was that they let us know what their treatment plans were and what their priority plans were in our region. And I believe both letters were sent twice and there was no response, which is what we at the time were told is probably what to expect. That being said, I think that's something that we could take another run at to try and get some attention. I know, and Colleen, you can jump in on this, other regional weed committees are struggling with the same issue of sort of non-engagement by federally regulated railways.
Director Gillis?
Yes, I distinctly remember what you're referring to, Jamie, because I chaired this committee for some time. And I'm wondering, speculating, I guess, as to whether or not there might be some opportunity at the political level. There's obviously almost no use whatsoever in approaching the railroads themselves. I don't know if we could go to the federal ministry and request some help from them and tell them that we've asked repeatedly for assistance from the railroads and have received no answer. It's just a suggestion. There might be some way to go to the federal minister of transportation and whine to him, I guess, or her, as the case may be, and suggest that we need some help to get some action out of these people. I don't know what else to suggest.
I wondered if we could go to our local MP, federal, just and have him work on it. Yeah. Jamie?
Yeah, so and that's something that I guess I'll remind the committee members, because I know there's some alternates and new committee members on here. One of the functions of this committee is they can make recommendations up to the board to pursue something like that. For example, sending a letter to a federal minister. So that's up for discussion. I'll turn it back to the chair, I guess.
Scott?
I just want one idea that if Jamie, if you want to share those letters with me, I've got some senior contacts with both CP and CN that I got to know quite well in the last year. So that might be helpful just to get a push it through them because they get right to their executive teams pretty easily.
Do we need a motion from this committee to go to the board, or?
If you want to go to the board with the recommendation, you do. But if you want us to first sort of look at kind of try another run at getting some staff feedback from CP and CN, we can go forward to that and report back to this committee at the May meeting.
At the next meeting, then we can make a decision beyond that. Sounds good to me. Any other ideas on that? Director Gillis, that sound good?
No, that sounds good to me. I wonder if Mr. Hildebrand is prepared to proceed with that, then I don't think you need a motion for that. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of response he gets.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that if Jamie can provide that to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. If there's nothing else for discussion on that, we can move on to the next agenda item, or I believe there's a recommendation for the committee before we move on to agenda item 6.3.
Yeah, the recommendation is that the 2022 Regional Invasive Plant Treatment Plans report be received for information. We need a mover and a seconder. Director Graham and Stephanie. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we go to 6.3, post-disaster invasive plant management discussion. Colleen?
Yeah, I'm going to defer this one to Jamie as well, and he'll lead the discussion on it.
Thanks, Colleen. Yeah, so this, we just have this up for a discussion piece. We don't have a presentation or any further information, but in light of what the year 2021 was, we wanted to open the floor up to look at these specific questions we have up on the screen right now and allow people to jump in with if they have. I guess the first question is, what's currently taking place on the land that you're on or responsible for management regarding a response to floods or fires or any other natural disasters, and then what's needed moving forward and what should we be thinking about, and then what role can this committee play in terms of that work that needs to be done. And again, I'm using the same phrase. I know this is a loaded question, but we wanted to bring it up for discussion with this committee.
Did we ever get anything back from the ministry when we applied for a plan similar to what we had with the Red Cross after the 2017 fires? And they were going to look into that in an ongoing plan as to this training or whatever it was. Did anything ever come back on that?
Specific to the Red Cross, yeah, we have had preliminary discussions with their staff saying if there was opportunity that we would again pursue funding for invasive plant treatment in burnt areas. And that's as far as the discussion has gone. I mean, the Red Cross is still focused on direct assistance for evacuees and impacted property, people who are still out of their homes from the flooding. But it was a positive response that they may be looking at that in the future again for us, and that we as the TNRD are willing to facilitate something like that again.
Yes. Any further ideas for Jamie on this?
So I just wanted to chime in here, and I don't think this is going to be the only year of natural disasters. I think it's something that's going to continue as we move forward. And I'm wondering if maybe something like a post-disaster plan for invasive plant management in our region might be a useful tool for land managers. And that could be built collectively with other, like with a working group or a technical advisory committee. It's just a guiding document saying like the disaster came, this is kind of the steps we need to follow through to get these pieces managed afterwards.
And is that something that could be built in maybe into the existing operational plan as a piece of that?
It could be, or it could be something separate. I mean, I think it'd be cleaner to keep them separate, to be honest, but they do have different purposes.
Director Gillis?
Yes, I can answer the second question for you. What's needed going forward is money, a lot of money. And this has been the Achilles heel really of this committee since its inception, I expect, certainly as long as I've been involved with it. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility of getting the province to commit on an ongoing basis. I know that I approached MLA / Highways Minister Stone when the other party was in power, and we did manage to get, I think, $1.25 million out of them. It was spread over 3 years, if I remember correctly, and maybe over a larger district than ours too, for all I can recall. But we're going to have to find some way to put pressure on these people and to get money, and a lot of money. We're talking, $675,000 or whatever we're talking about this year. This is a drop in the bucket compared to what we really need, and you'd have to multiply that by 10 really to achieve what we have to achieve if we're going to control invasive plants. We'll never eliminate them, but if we're even going to control them in this province, we're going to need buckets and buckets of money. And it seems to me that every time we turn around, there's more places for the province to spend that money and far more sexy things than invasive plants, which is really a problem for us. So all I can say is that what's needed going forward is money, and we're going to have to try to explore new ways of getting at the necessary funding, or we're going to lose this battle. And I find it really distressing to say that, but it's true. We'll either get serious about funding this, or we will lose the battle. So I don't know what to suggest. Go back after the province perhaps, but we still have to keep beating that drum for certain, or we're going to lose the war.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. Any further ideas on this subject?
I'm just wondering, based on your comments, Chair Gillis, taking a different avenue in the letters that we write and kind of linking them to more current issues that are sexy, like climate change and that sort of thing. And maybe there is budget in their climate change function. I don't know how provincial government budgets work, but maybe there is money in those pots for invasive plant management.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think really what you're saying is here's another angle that perhaps we can explore. I think we have to explore all angles. That sounds like a good one.
I do too. Anybody else have any ideas?
I was just going to comment on your idea to have a post-disaster. Oh, I think it's on. Yeah. On the post-disaster plan, I think that would be helpful. I think when we get into these situations that we're usually so far behind that doing like a literature review, getting all the information that we need to make informed decisions, it would be nice if that was already prepared. I know from our perspective, we're just ramping up all of our inventory efforts in those areas, purchased some native seed to use to try to combat any outbreaks that we're finding. But any additional suggestions or coordination or whatever would be welcome for sure.
Director Roden.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, I read the report that West Trek Geotechnical prepared for the Ministry of Forests on the Tremont Creek wildfire that was east of Ashcroft. And one of the things that stood out was about sediment-laden floods that are expected on, they say, steeper open slopes that burned at a moderate to high severity. The loss of protective tree canopy and soil organic layers means mineral soil is more exposed to precipitation and has a lower capacity to absorb it. This increases flow runoff and soil movement. And this ties back, I think, to the seeding, the grass seeding program that we saw after the 2017 Elephant Hill wildfire in this region to try and get some of the grasses growing back again. Now, this sediment-laden flooding, according to the West Trek report, generally occurs within the first year. So after a fire, so I guess we're too late for 2022. But that would be something that perhaps the TNI PMC could advocate for, is another reseeding program to try to get some vegetation back on these slopes, especially the steeper ones, because the report notes that at risk from these sediment-laden floods are Highway 97 C near Ashcroft, Highway 97D near Logan Lake, Highway 1 possibly, the CP rail line between Ashcroft and Sava or Wallachine. So that's going to be a huge consideration, I think, considering the vast amount of area that was burned and the possibility of these mudslides basically coming down.
Thank you, Barb. Anybody got a reply?
I don't want to put you on the spot, Stephanie, but BC Parks did some reseeding, did you not, after fires, and were your results mixed in terms of establishment? Someone was talking to me about that.
Yes, well, I mean, I guess I just came in May, so, but I did look at fire guards in particular. That was our focus because we're looking at rehab of all those fire guards this year. But I looked at the ones from the previous seasons, and the regeneration wasn't great, but in general, natural regeneration was pretty good. So we have seeded already at Thompson-Nicola, for example, and we're going to seed that one again. I mean, we're doing that, but effectiveness, I'm not sure. Now, I think Wendy, maybe she has some comments on whether there's been some research on that, but.
Yeah, I actually have a student, an undergrad student for her honors thesis, doing a lit review on seeding for erosion control. And, really the data shows we want to do it. I think but the data shows that generally we're not really very successful, especially seeding agronomic species and grasses for erosion control, because in the long term, it has other negative impacts. So it's kind of a weighing, where we should be doing that, and whether often the problem is by the time we get the seeding in place and the plants established, the big erosion events have already occurred. And for it to be really effective, we have to have super high cover, like 80% cover, which then means if you want it to move back to a natural ecosystem, now you have this agronomic kind of successional roadblock. So there's kind of pros and cons to seeding for erosion control. When I have this report done from my one student, I'd be happy to share it, because she's been looking at that and kind of delving into the literature. But we found some huge literature reviews, like meta-analysis, and they're all speaking to the same point, that seeding of grass species after wildfire is really not the best method for erosion control. And maybe we should be looking at other features like silt fences and other ways to deal with erosion, as opposed to just seeding.
Thank you, Wendy. Morgan, had another question?
I was just going to mention we are coordinating works with FLNRO on fire guards. Maybe a question for number 2 is what's needed going forward. Maybe just trying to figure out where we can and cannot access still, I guess, or what's being worked on for access, for bridges and other infrastructure that we'd need to do all the works on these various sites, because there's quite a bit of fires at Lytton Creek, July Mountain, Tremont. I know there's a few over in Kamloops still, and just trying to prioritize or think of what to prioritize first, or where we can still access.
Jamie?
So since no one's on the call here from Ministry of Forest, does anyone else know that they have any plans in terms of rehabbing fire guards specifically? Again, Parks is doing it, but does FLNRO have a plan in place? Does anyone know that?
Actually,
Yeah.
the rehab in Parks is done by FLNRO, or now MOF. And they've been working all through the winter, and they've actually developed like an entire program within MOF. They're just working on the rehab, so it is active. But regards to the specifics, Morgan, maybe you have more information on the specifics of it.
Director Gillis.
Thank you, Chairperson. Certainly, Ministry of Forests is responsible for range management. And I'm not an agronomist, so I can't argue whether or not seeding is the best means of erosion control, but I can tell you for certain, without fear of successful contradiction, that seeding is definitely the best way of range restoration. So the Ministry of Forests might be interested in it from that aspect.
Yep. Morgan, did you have anything else, or?
I was just going to add in, it's Wendy. I don't know exactly what the ministry's protocol. I have seen proposed seating plans. I do know that under the ministry, BC Wildfire Service, because of the Wildfire Act, is required to rehabilitate fire guards and any disruption put in from fire activities. So they'll be actively working on all of those. But I don't know, that doesn't really relate to areas where there might be high fire severity. And then that's a decision from the Flynn Road to on where they might want to, if they want to seed within those areas and whether they're actively doing that. So I don't know where they're at on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that some of the Flynn Row staff may be, busy with other projects, especially, some of the flooding areas along Highway 8. I know BJ Moore, who was originally coordinating all the fire rehab stuff within the Cascades district anyway. He's been busy, dealing with Highway 8 and bridge removals and stuff like that. So we are still planning to go back and fully rehab those fire guards, but it's just been pushed off to the side for a bit.
Thanks, Morgan. Jamie?
Can I comment? I just want to go back to Director Roden's comment about areas sliding and sloughing and that sort of thing and stabilizing banks. And I'm just wondering if at this point, the committee can kind of dig to see what's being done at a provincial level, if anything, to stabilize those banks, if there's plans for anything. Just as an information piece for everybody, because from what I've seen of studies that, yes, seeding, especially on hydrophobic soils, is not the best thing to stabilize a bank. I'm just curious if the province has something planned for that in terms of roadways and roadsides.
Yeah, it's something we could look into. I think that's delving outside of invasive plants, though, and into more of the concerns of the, the highway and emergency response. But if they are seeding, then then it comes into the invasive plant world for sure. Yeah, and I guess related to that, I just had a comment on Director Gillis's comment on the seeding, and I totally, agree that range rest after a fire, if we can get seeds, get grass growing, that's ideal. Just to bring up an example though, with the Red Cross funding and the program Mike Deedles is running, we were able to do a lot of seeding, which the challenge that we ran into, at least at an operational level, was getting the seeding to actually establish. So doing a large, broad scale seeding program, you're really putting the seed out and then hoping for rain. And in that case, we were, because the funding was a year behind, it was 2 years later that we're seeding. And so definitely wouldn't say it was a waste of time and money, but we definitely saw mixed results on the ground of when the seed worked and when it didn't. So that's just the challenge with the seeding piece, is that when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, you think, oh, why did we do this? But definitely a tool in the toolbox to keep in mind.
And I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been in a webinar, but I believe it did, depending on the fire severity, you almost have to bring in topsoil to get the seed to establish, like a foot of topsoil and compost to get the seed to establish. So just, I think it would depend on the area and the severity of the fire.
Anything further on that? We'll go back to Colleen.
Yeah, I think that's the end of agenda item C. So 8C. So back to you.
So we're into new business.
That's right. Yeah.
Is there any new business? If not, we'll have the next meeting wrap up. That's Colleen, when's that?
Yeah, May 18th at 1:30, and fingers crossed, we can have a in-person meeting by that time of everyone in the room to have good discussion.
So that's May the 18th at 1:30.
Yeah.
In the boardroom. With all hopes.
That's, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And
Any
actually,
further?
and a reminder that the focus, what we try to do is focus the agenda of the March meeting on operational on the ground treatment plans, because now everyone is actively, hiring their contractors and planning for the summer. The May meeting, our focus is more on the education and outreach initiatives. So at that meeting, Colleen will be focusing more on, discussion around plans for engagement, field days, that sort of thing. So just put that on everyone's radar.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and have somebody make the next motion is to adjourn. Director Graham, second, Director Gills. All in favor? Thank you.